So from a market perspective, you need to evaluate your current and new opportunities over near-term horizons, like 1 to 3 years. You want to ask yourself, how much growth can we get from our current customers over the next 2 or 3 years? It's helpful to do a sales estimate and strategic assessment. We want to determine new areas for growth and prioritize and plan. And also, it's a good idea. That's where the EOS implementers really get going. They map out a growth horizon for the next several years. They do a 5 to 10 year. Now, talk about offerings. There's a lot of things one can do with pricing. Do you have a pricing strategy? A lot of companies that we've run into, that we've worked with rather, have not had a good pricing strategy or plan, because there are different ways, especially in business to business world, to price by customers, by product families, etc. All companies should do a pricing assessment and just find out if you have an opportunity. How does your pricing compare to your key competitors? Are you leaving money on the table? In the restaurant business, especially in the fast food section, when I was working for Hardee's back in the day, we did not have what I'd call a pricing strategy. We had what we called a pricing policy. Our district managers checked the pricing of McDonald's and Wendy's and Burger King's of certain like items like hamburgers and French fries, and we'd bring those in and look at those. We'd make sure we didn't price above their items. In some case, we priced more if we thought we had a better product, etc. But it's much more of a policy as opposed to a strategy. So I won't go into this too much for the small group, because from a product, there are product family pricing strategies. There are milk product strategies. There are, Arletha must have jumped out again. I'm going to admit Arletha again. So there are milk product strategies. There are maintain strategies. There are product growth strategies. And there are product star strategies. Milk product strategies basically just take price increases, and you might reduce, eliminate products, or if you reduce costs, you keep the same price, so you keep the same margins. Maintain strategies is when you price your product at or above the average services, and maybe some customers pay more than others. Product growth strategies is when you start adding innovation. And then product star strategies when you do different pricing for differentiation, and you add the innovation, take the price up, etc. In the consumer world, it's a little more complicated than that, because you've got so many different varied customers, and it takes some actual research really to get there. All right, now let's talk about positioning a little bit. Positioning is important. It was written about many times over the last 25, 30 years. Positioning is all about owning a position in the consumer's mind, and it helps that you do targeting and messaging for clarity, relevance, and differentiation. Chief outsiders, we use a positioning thing that we call a brand house. You got to work through the why, the how, and the what. Speaking of your earlier comment, Richard, about the why and the TED Talk. When it comes to positioning, the why is very important for a business as well. Why are you in existence? Why does your business exist? What value does it bring? How is it different than the competition? So you want to ask yourself questions like why it's relevant, what we do, and where we're different. I'm going to use an Imperial Sugar example. When Art Saxby, our CEO and founder, was working for Imperial Sugar, he was trying to sell more sugar. And from their sales force, because they hadn't done a lot of information, didn't have much data in-house when he got there, they basically found out that they said, like, what do we do? Imperial Sugar, we refine and sell sugar. Why it's relevant? Because it's sweet. And then finally, how we're different? Because they, according to their sales team, had great relationships with all their clients. Well, upon further investigation, Art spoke with a particularly stodgy, kind of grumpy-looking industrial buyer. You can see this guy here up in the upper right. He knew what the product needs were, but upon further conversation with this industrial buyer, he found out that the industrial buyer made it very, very, very clear he could not shut down production due to the sugar supply. If sugar stopped and he had to stop the production line, there was going to be hell to pay, and he did not want to be surprised. So as further work, what Art did for Imperial Sugar was he found out that if we listened to that buyer and other customers that they talked to, what they did is really they simplified ordering. They found out they were really, really good at simplifying ordering for their customers, and there would be no surprises because that simplification made it very easy, and it was different because they offered integration with their IT services. So in the end, based on a learning that the customer really wanted, Imperial Sugar's Why We Exist went from simply making sugar to being the best supply chain in the sugar industry. And as a result, that industrial buyer was able to increase his price 10% and still get a 30% volume increase, and became more of a happy guy.
No, but I love the smile, the adding of the smiling teeth. That was fun, Doug.
Yeah, that's supposed to be. Thank you.
Well, my comment is just that, people in business do things believe the customer wants, but your example is finding out what the customer actually wants and values, and that's what you want to know, what drives the customer, not what you think drives the customer.
Correct. That's why I'm currently working with a prospect that kind of in your wheelhouse a little bit, Kelly. They sell services to franchisees, but they'd like to sell their services to franchisors. And since I've worked for franchisors my entire career, plus I know franchisees, et cetera, that's why we're a common fit. But to your point, Richard, I know the franchisors have a different set of questions and different set of needs than franchisees do when they're buying this particular service. So it's exactly right. That's why knowing what your customer wants and talking with your customer, whether it's from your sales team, through research for consumer brands, et cetera, very, very important to understand what your consumer wants, because if your why doesn't match the consumers you're looking for, it's not going to work.
Well, if it's okay, I'll jump in with an example there as well, Doug. So when I was doing the client satisfaction program for the wealth advisory firm here in Atlanta, they got a lot of reinforcement of what they thought they knew about their clients, which was fantastic. So there was a lot of alignment there. But going back to one of your prior screens in terms of new services or new needs, consistently through one of the open-ended questions that we were asking, the clients advised on a new need that they had that the current company was not meeting. And that was an unexpected result that came out of that client satisfaction, actually validating what they thought that they knew about their customers. And so they were able to add a new service that wasn't even on their radar screen to add. So I love that story, and I wanted to share that example.
That's a great example. That's exactly why you need to talk to your customers, and actually, more importantly, listen to your customers, which they did very well. Great job. Great example. So I'm going to take a slide aside. I'm a fan of positioning statements because I think they're important, and I've got two to share with you today. One is the Apple positioning statement. A positioning statement comes from the research you've done with your company, competition, competitors, listen to your customers, etc. Because a positioning statement kind of helps to start form the strategy, if you will, because it addresses the target or the market, it addresses the category, usually provides a point of difference, and then benefit, and then finally a reason to believe. So in this case, Apple's positioning statement is rather lengthy, but I'm going to walk through it for you fairly quickly because I think I'm doing okay on time. I just want to walk through all the words so you understand what each of those means. So for individuals who want the best personal computer or mobile device, Apple is the leader of technology, of the technology industry, that delivers the most innovative products so they can enjoy seamless experiences across all Apple devices and be empowered with breakthrough services, because Apple takes an innovative approach to business best practices, considering the impact our products have on customers and the planet. Try to do that in one breath. So there's a lot going on there. I'm not going to unpack everything, but the target. So the target's not always a demographic target. That's the first thing to understand. In the next example, you'll see the same thing. It's not always we want to attract males 25 to 54, or the HUFUs 18 to 34, or we want to attract women 18 to 49. It's not always a demographic thing. It's usually more of a lifestyle thing. So for individuals who want the best personal computer or mobile device, it's important to understand. I think we all would agree that typically, or at least historically, Apple has been one of the most innovative tech firms out there. Their market value wouldn't be as high as it is if they weren't. The end benefit is that we enjoy seamless experiences. And the reason we believe it is because Apple does take an innovative approach to business. It goes all way back to the iPod and the original Apple products and the iMac and all that sort of thing. Closer to my heart is the brand positioning we set up before I left Firehouse Subs. And talking about a target market again, the brand positioning starts with two hardworking people craving more. Firehouse Subs is a nearby place for a sandwich inspired by firemen to generously serve food and community. So it satisfies all those deals. There's the reason to believe, inspired by firemen, and why they exist, generously serve food and community, and they really believe in that because of their Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation. So positioning statement is great. I like this one better than Apple's because it's much shorter, but Apple's is certainly appropriate for a technical business. Okay, now let's go on to the third gear, execution. Talk about resources, tactics, and metrics. And Jim, to your point about what does strategy mean, this is where we really start looking at the resources. And as you might imagine, there are a number of, I don't have any examples today, but a lot of you can develop a great strategy, but execution can fall on its face. If you don't get sales and execution doesn't work, it's not a good thing. So another fun cartoon to share with you. Resources are all about money, people, and tech. So that's pretty simple. Jim, you outlined it the same thing. You indicated capital. So if you're on the market, there are some other resources that may be available, but we're just going to call money for now. From a resource standpoint, it's good to invest to understand the marketplace better. So VOC stands for voice of the customer. You need to understand your competition. We've gone through that in the first gear. You need to build awareness, interest, and consideration, and drive an intent, which is what the marketing group has to do. So what resources are going to be allocated to do those things? Plus sales has to have resources for the evaluation and purchase part of the sales funnel. You need to identify business from current customers, new segments, and new products. Definitely want to eliminate random acts of sales and our marketing. And if anybody has any questions on that later, I'd be happy to answer those. Then budget resources to maximize efficiencies and results. So it all goes back to the metrics, what's going to happen on how you measure things and what is working and what is not working. So here's kind of a mess of a chart. We call it a bubble chart. The bubble chart is meant simply to start with the continuum on the top of the page that has awareness, interest, consideration, intent, evaluation, purchase, that gray arrow. And then you put down the things on the page you're spending money on or actually executing. So in this case, you can see this company was doing some online and print advertising. There's a question mark whether or not they should do a new booth. They want to do a web refresh, which could actually get all of the pivot points. There's major events. Then there's the dotted lines of things they probably should do. They should start working down the sales funnel. So it's a good idea. This is really a good way to figure out what you're doing, what part of the sales funnel addresses, and what gaps you have. That's the whole purpose of a bubble chart. So from a tactical standpoint, question you need to ask yourself, are you doing random acts of sales and marketing? Hopefully by this stage, if you've gone through the growth gears, you're not, because you're going to plan things out. It's all going to be based on strategy. Do you need a better plan? Typically, when we start working with companies at Chief Outsiders, they do need a better plan, which is why they've hired us, which is why they would have hired any of you. You have a strong segmentation model to focus business development. These are just questions you should ask, or the company should ask themselves internally. You have a lead generation strategy, priority and plan, and can you measure activities and ROI effectiveness? So here's another example of tactics, and this is more about like an objective should be definable and measurable. I'm just going to call them initiative 1, 2, and 3. I get it's not an objective statement. This particular case, a business-to-business firm wants to do, they hope to realize $1.5 million in new revenue through new product development. That's what NPD means. But you also need to make sure each KPI and each initiative has an owner. So in this case, that's probably going to be owned by marketing. Initiative 2, they're going to go into a new segment or a new market. They expect to get $1 million in additional revenue there, and that's where sales is going to own that one. And finally, they're going to optimize their SKUs, their stock keeping units, and they're going to save about $500,000, and that's going to be on operations. So it's important to have the alignment and know who owns each project or each initiative to make sure everybody sings out of the same hymnal. To use a restaurant example, if a restaurant wants to increase transactions 2%, marketing's most likely going to own that. If you want to penetrate new states, that's probably franchise sales. And if you want to improve customer satisfaction by 3 percentage points, that's probably going to be operations, because they have the operators, the general managers, the crew members that work with the customers every day. All pretty simple. Make sense? All right, so finally, don't be afraid to try new things. This actually says be afraid to try new things. Either way, you should try new things is the point. And through all this, learning through the growth gears, we've learned, hopefully you've learned that this was kind of a key learning from the research we did with the Become School of Business at the University of Texas. Running a business and growing a business are two different things. You need to understand your organization's bias. There are some companies that have an operating focus and some have a market focus. You need to understand where you are on that of those two. Growth is a linear, logical process, which is what we've laid out as what we call the growth gears. You need to start with market insights, then you align your strategy with those market insights, and then finally, the execution stuff is the last step. And that's it.
Thank you, Doug.